The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
For Real Agriculture, I'm Kelvin Hepner, and pleased to be joined by Marla Riekman, Soil Management Specialist with Manitoba Agriculture. And Marla, of course, there's a lot of discussion about the 4Rs when it comes to our fertilizer strategy and approaches to applying fertilizer and meeting the crop's nutrient needs. We have these 4 categories on the chart when it comes to 4Rs, but really they are not independent from each other. That's kind of your lesson that you're trying to get across here at Crop Diagnostic School.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, again, 4Rs, it's applying the right source at the right rate, right time, and right place. And I think it's important that we don't forget about the fact that, you know, again, they're not independent. When we think about, we've been going through it at Crop Diagnostic School with a chart with like, how do you do like at a basic or an intermediate or an advanced approach from 4Rs for rate and for source and for, you know, placement and timing. And when we go through it in a very basic approach like that, it kind of makes us think about it as being, again, very independent. But when you start combining these concepts together, that's when you get that flexibility, the different ways of being able to manage different years, right? Like different weather things, whatever's getting thrown at us, prices, commodity prices, input prices, all that kind of stuff. We can work with those 4Rs to try to, again, modify from year to year. Doesn't mean that we're always going with like high level advanced everything. Sometimes we might be pushed back, but again, it's a bit about that flexibility about being able to kind of determine what's going to work best for you in that situation to be the most economical and therefore come along as being, you know, good agronomic planning and environmentally beneficial at the same time.
If we're looking at it through that environmental lens, it's interesting. You can actually become more advanced in one category, but still take a step backwards in terms of your overall environmental impact or the emissions from a fertilizer application.
Yeah, so I mean, you can think about it's like, okay, we want to, you know, go like super environmental, and we might be able to make like really specific decisions. But again, if it's not going to meet the bottom line for a farmer, then it's not actually going to be beneficial in the long run. And if it's not going to be, you know, economical for a farmer, you're not going to expect somebody to continue to want to carry out that practice. So, I mean, we often talk about the fact that to be the most efficient or the most effective, we need to have good agronomy, good economics, and good environmental planning all working together, because if it is one benefiting one, it should kind of benefit the rest of them if it's going to be something that is actually going to be useful for a farmer and a tool that, you know, they're going to want to come back to.
Yeah. I think of the example, you use a urease inhibitor, enhanced efficiency fertilizer product. So you're moving away from just urea to using that. But say that means you apply it in spring broadcast instead of banding it. Yeah. You've moved ahead in one category, but you've moved backwards in the broader sense, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of like looking at the approaches again. They're not independent of each other. So, I mean, if you were broadcasting urea in the spring and not incorporating it and just hoping for that rainfall in order to drive it into the ground, you know, you need that half-inch rain. What's the probability of getting that? Well, it depends on where you are. You can look back at some of the climate information. You might have, you know, a decent probability of getting that half-inch rain event on a specific day in early May when you are trying to actually, you know, get that urea in the ground. But in a year like this year, here at Carmen, where we are for Crop Diagnostic School, we went through the first 6 weeks from like May 1 until mid-June with 17 millimeters of rain, and that was it. And so we did not have that rain event that we required in order to actually move that urea in the ground. So in that case, you know, we did a demonstration looking at ammonia volatilization. We actually had a benefit then, of course, by using a product like an Agrotane, an NBPT, some kind of urease inhibitor, because now that urease inhibitor is actually going to, again, protect for a little bit. But is it protecting long enough? You know, we were looking for 7 to 10 days of protection to wait for the rain, but 6 weeks later, the rain still hadn't come.
Yeah. And I guess machinery and design of your seeding equipment, fertilizer application equipment is all part of this conversation as well when it comes to the 4Rs and agronomy. It needs to influence your equipment purchasing decisions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I recall a previous Manitoba Agronomist conference and an agronomist who was on a panel talking about, you know, I just wish that the the equipment, or that I wish that my farmer would talk to me before they go to the equipment dealer. And I think that's a really important thing. We need to remember the agronomic plan of the farm and what the farm's capabilities are when we're making those decisions for equipment. So, I mean, you mentioned here where we're standing talking about canola, we're looking at seed safe rates for ammonium sulfate. Of course, we've got salt toxicity and ammonium toxicity. We've got these problems that can come along if we try to put too much down with the seed. What alternatives do we have for placement if all we have at the ready for us is something with a narrow opener, very small seedbed utilization, and we need to get fertilizer down with the crop? We're really restricted on what we can put down because we don't have the flexibility to put it down elsewhere. If we don't have mid-row band or something like that, or some kind of, other opener options for placement, side banding, whatever that ends up being. And so again, we're restricted by the equipment sometimes, and it's important to keep in mind that, again, when we're doing those types of investments, if we're not thinking about being able to actually place fertilizer in the future, we're investing in a piece of equipment that is restricting us more than anything, as opposed to opening up more options for us. And that kind of more very focused approach, one would say, can actually become problematic in the future, because now we have to figure out other ways to adapt to get that fertilizer in the ground.
Yeah. An example there again would be seed safe fertilizer and pushing rates there, because that's what we're set up to get the fertilizer down that way, even though it might be toxic to the canola seed in this example.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, and we don't often we don't spend enough time actually going out and, turn the fertilizer off for a little bit and see how things look, and go out and do plant stand counts and really document the change. Specifically for the stuff that we were talking about here today with the ammonium sulfate toxicity on canola, we're talking about rolling landscapes and hillier landscapes with eroded knolls, where we actually have a higher risk of ammonium toxicity, where that topsoil has been stripped off, because you've got this high carbonate subsoil that's exposed, and that's kind of disrupting things in terms of how that is affecting the canola. And when we have these lower stands, essentially, and lower emergence on those eroded knolls, you're going to blame that on the fact that, it's dry up there's not a whole lot of topsoil. The crop never really grows really well on those eroded knolls.
Flea beetles were probably bad in that spot too.
Yeah, right. We'll come up with every other reason except for the fact that it's probably actually the seed placement of that fertilizer that's causing the problem. We're not going to know that unless we shut that down and check that out and see what that looks like.
Yeah. Overall then, in terms of the take-home message here at Crop Diagnostic School, I guess bringing it back to the 4 R's, it's not independent of each other. It is everything's connected when it comes to that fertilizer strategy.
Absolutely. And again, just keeping those things in mind, and what tools do you have in the toolbox? So when you're looking at the farm itself and you're looking at all the different things that you have at the ready, what crops you're growing, what fertilizer placement options you have, what inputs are you putting into that in terms of information, like soil samples, and whether it's, zone sampling, it's composite sampling, all those different types of pieces of information that are going into an overall plan. All of those things then allow for, again, the flexibility and that application of that 4R plan in kind of real time. But we need to be able to carry out essentially the plan if we have that right equipment option for us.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of Crop Diagnostic School, Marla.
Thanks a lot.